Anyone who believes in indefinite growth on a physically finite planet is either mad or an economist.
We don't want to focus politics on a notion that involves the rejection of principles around which a large majority of our fellow citizens organize their lives.
We are not as endlessly manipulable and as predictable as you would think.
If you pick up the average human evolution book, it's all about stones and bone, or what seems to me the really crucial thing. That is the social and cognitive evolutionary history that underpins the stones and bones. So I'm going to sort of give you a little glimpse, partially of that, and sort of put it in terms really of why it is that humans aren't just great apes. What really happened that made that difference? And if you like to think in cognitive terms, and we're quite used to sort of seeing all this kind of fancy stuff that monkeys and apes are able to do. Kanzi here, in fact, talking with her handler there. This is sort of nothing terribly exciting, I don't think. I mean, you know, it's the kind of thing you might expect of very smart animals. But it leaves open the question of what is it exactly that's the difference between us and let's say, the other great apes, the other members of our immediate biological family. And I will put it to you really, and that's kind of my theme if you like, that what it's really about is what goes on in our minds, what we can do in the virtual space of our minds. And it comes down really to these two things at the top here, essentially religion and storytelling. That's the outcome, that's where we finally arrive at. And that part of that story is about these two activities, which, although not necessarily entirely unique to humans, certainly as far as laughter is concerned, nonetheless, are used and exploited among humans in ways which other animals certainly don't do. So at the end of the day, we do these things and they don't. The question is why and how did we get there? Well, the starting point really is this relationship here, the social brain hypothesis as it's known, an explanation for why primates have very large brains. The argument is they live in very complex social systems. If you plot something like social group size here as a measure of, a very simple measure of social complexity against some measure of brain size, here the relative size of the neocortex, you get this general nice relationship. But here the ape sitting out here, the family to which we belong. If we plug us in, so this is essentially a ratio of the neocortex to the rest of the brain, the subcortical brain. About 80% of our total brain is neocortex. If you read up and plug us across, you get this mystical number, as I like to say, Dunbar's number. So anyway, the question is that really true? Do we really go around in groups of that size? The answer seems to be yes. Here's just some casual observations of different kinds. I kind of like to point out the Doomsday Book. This is the historian's estimate. It's nothing to do with me. They did this a long time ago. Of the average village size in English and Welsh counties. And county after county after county, the average village size from the Doomsday Book. Census is about 150, or very, very close to 150. And I kind of like to remark on this one because they clearly did not know the theories. They had no way to predict that that's what they should get. But more usefully, here are census data from hunter-gatherer societies mainly. And if you census hunter-gatherer societies, like any good modern human or primate society, they're multi-level. They have lots of layers of inclusivity, as it were. These are the typical size of bands. These are the typical size of clans or regional groupings, megabands and tribes. And this layer of grouping, very characteristically referred to very often as something like a clan, has the average very, very close to 150. There's obviously some variance around that. If you try and ask people to list out all their friends and relations that are part of their social network, and here's one example, just asking people to list out all the recipients of their Christmas cards, that's, say, all the people in the household, again, it comes out very close to 150. So if you like, this is where we appeared from, the ancestral, most complex apes, as it were, and here's where we ended up. And we can use this relationship to figure out what community sizes were at different stages through human evolution. We can just plug in the one thing, of course, the paleoanthropologists give us beyond all measure is cranial volumes. We can figure out from cranial volumes what their neocortex ratios are and plug those figures in here and read off how group size has changed through time, not necessarily progressively. It may have gone up, it may have gone down. After all, many species of hominins went extinct. But the point is, we can make a very good prediction because these relationships turn out to hold up extremely well in monkeys and apes generally. In fact, it turns out this is not just a clump here, but a series of grades which are actually very tightly bunched. So the question is, from our point of view, however, is how on earth did our ancestors manage, as they pushed community sizes up and up and up towards what they are now in modern humans, how on earth did they keep them coherent? Because the whole issue with primates is that they live in what is essentially an implicit social contract. They essentially solving the problems of successful survival and reproduction collectively, and in order to do that, you have to engage in effectively a trade-off with everybody else to make sure everybody else gets their fair share. And if you take more than your fair share, the whole thing falls apart. The whole social contract, in effect, falls apart. So somehow you have to create this sense of community and bonding that allows you to do that. Monkeys and apes, as I'll show you in a minute, do this through grooming. But the key is, grooming is limited in the end in the amount of time you can do it for. Now, in terms of how primates create their social relationships, it's actually a two-process mechanism. Part of it involves grooming here. That produces a massive release of endorphins in the brain. Endorphins are part of the pain control system. But then they give you this kind of opiate-like lightheadedness and all's well with the world, and you feel very warm towards those you're doing whatever with. And that, in a sense, sets up a kind of psychopharmacological platform off which the second component, which is the cognitive component, can then be built. And that's where the social brain bit comes in, and what it's doing is essentially allowing you to build up relationships of reciprocity and obligation and trust and so on. And in doing so, you create these large, or by primate standards, large social communities. So I'm going to talk you through very quickly through each of those two elements. We'll start with the cognitive component. The key to that probably, we think, is